All right, so this is for the second part, which is the career planning. This should be pretty simple, but let's just go through it for clarity. All right, so we're looking at entry requirements and selection procedures. So the Uniform Public Services have a very strict and stringent entry and selection process. So the questions we've got here: should anybody be able to join the Uniform Public Services? No, we've obviously got to make sure that we have the right people, and then the question then becomes, how do we make sure that we get the right people to join the public services? All right, and then the last question to think about is it right or wrong that we have certain conditions within the Uniform Public Services that maybe other organisations don't have? So, for example, if you looked at the Equality Act, do the Uniform Public Services follow the Equality Act to the letter of the law? Clue: no, because, for example, you can't have a blind soldier, you can't have a deaf or hearing impaired police officer. All right, so what we're just thinking about is, how do we define the right people? How do we get there? So the first thing we have are the entry requirements. So as it says, all right, these are the things you must be or that you must have before you can apply. So this is really important. Obviously, the reason that quite a lot of you are at college is that you don't, for example, meet the first criteria for most of the uniformed public services, which is the age criteria. Most of the public services want you to be 18. All right, for example, if you are under 18, you can get into the military, but you must have parental consent. So what are the age restrictions? So, for example, I am too old to be a Royal Marine. All right, so what are the things you must be? So age might be one. Education is another one. What qualifications do you need to have? All right, so obviously different uniform public services have different educational requirements. The Metropolitan Police and the Essex Police, for example, the Metropolitan Police are changing very rapidly what they want for their entry requirements to be a police officer. Essex Police have had an educational requirement in there for quite a while. Some services, for example the Fire Brigade, don't need you to have any qualifications, but you must obviously meet their basic educational requirements by doing some testing. So look at that kind of thing. Residency: where do you live? So whether that be, are you a citizen of the United Kingdom, or even where do you live locally? So again, I cannot be a Metropolitan Police officer because I do not live within the London area. I live just outside. So looking at, do you have to have a particular residency, country, or where you are within the country? Entry requirements, again, physical ones. So, for example, are there fitness tests? A lot of people get really hung up on the fitness tests, unless you want to be a Royal Marine. Most of the fitness tests you should be able to pass with just a little bit of fitness training. So don't get hung up on those. The educational ones are far more important than the physical ones. And then obviously medical conditions. Again, as we've talked about, certain medical conditions might exclude you from joining the public services. So, for example, I cannot be an airline pilot, which is an example I always use because I wear glasses. So there are certain medical conditions that exclude you from certain jobs or even applying to join public services. So, entry requirements, things you must have before you can apply. All right. Then we have the selection process. So what we mean here is what happens if you've got the entry requirements. How do you then get to your very first day of training? We're not interested in the training procedure, we're interested in how you get a job in that. So there might be things like application forms, all right? Now they might be paper-based or electronic-based, all right? But they still have application forms. They need to get basic information from you, and also some of them now have sections where they're asking you to write particular things, all right? So it's not just a basic, where do you live, what qualifications do you have, although that is important, and there might be things like security vetting and stuff like that. But also, for example, why do you want to be in this particular public service? Do you know what you're going to have to do? There might be CVs and letters, not so much anymore, but they still might form a particular part of it. So it's just good to have an up-to-date CV and be able to write a letter. Then we have things like tests, psychometric and competency tests. So these could be maths and English tests. These could be verbal reasoning tests. These could be mechanical reasoning tests. lots of different things. Again, it will depend on the job that you want to go into, which particular service you want to go into, what the kind of things they are looking for from you. All right, so these will be obviously written tests or tests on the computer and stuff like that. Role plays, these are becoming more and more prevalent, especially in the emergency services. So, for example, in the police service and even more so in the fire service, they will put you into particular situations and see how you cope. It might be within group work, it might be you on your own with another member of the services. So, how do you cope? What do you say? How do you cope with situations? What action do you take, etc. Interviews, well, those are going to be just questions, about what you are, what you want to do, etc. And then, as we said, the physical tests, so there might be the fitness tests and things like medicals and security vetting. So for your little guide booklet thing, you need to make sure that you've got all of these, and also it's a really good idea, to know what the selection process and the entry requirements are for the job that you want to do. All right, so as I said, should be pretty obvious, but just make sure you've got all that information.